Welcome to Collector's Corner, the premier digital art platform.
We help collectors gain and maintain their edge, all while appreciating beautiful art.
Let's jump in. Hey, welcome everybody. We have an exciting episode for you today. I am here as always with my co-host Jared, who you may know as J_Pause online. I am P, you may know me as Aston Cloud online, and we have a fantastic guest from Gen.art, founder Adam. And I think, what's your handle online? I know it's Notion on Discord.
I think it's Notion_Adam on Twitter. I need to double check that, but I think it is Notion_Adam.
Notion_Adam. We'll call you Adam here because it's way less awkward. How are you, my friend?
Yeah, good to be here. Thank you guys for inviting me on.
Thank you for coming. We are really excited because you're a fantastic collector, as we've talked about in the past. So we're excited to share with everybody your collecting journey. And then you launched Gen.art, which is a massive NFT launch platform, as we call them.
Yep.
So places where artists do primary sales. And you have a lot of exciting stuff coming up there as well. So a lot to cover. Just a little bit of house cleaning before we go in. This is an audio only episode. We will have it up on YouTube. We'll have show links to everything. We'll have timestamps so you can jump to parts that you like. And then we'll have everything you need to know to find Adam and hear about all the cool stuff going on with Gen.art and everything else. So let's go ahead and jump in. Adam, how are you? I know you mentioned that you're just doing a lot of exciting stuff. How have things been going? And maybe you can tell us a little bit about your journey into Gen.art, to creating Gen.art, you as a collector, how it all happened.
Yeah, sure thing. So, I'm a little bit tired because, as we were saying, I flew yesterday into NFT London and back. So it's been quite a rushed 24 hours. But yeah, Gen.art, me and Chris. So Chris is my co-founder. He is the brains and tech behind everything. So I'm the one that speaks and does all of the marketing and anything that's not tech related. But Chris is very much an important part of the team. And both of us started Gen.art, I think it was August 2021. And it was off the back of, obviously, I had got into crypto a little bit before that. I had stumbled somehow into CryptoPunks and really enjoyed sort of the notion of stuff being stored immutably on the blockchain. And I've had a little bit of an artistic sort of collector's journey offline. So I really enjoy the artists, Banksy and George Condo, and I've got a couple of their pieces in the house. And what really piqued my interest was this sense of provenance. So having art that's immutable on the blockchain and 100% sort of provenance. At the moment, if you go and buy a Picasso, you'll have to get it sort of analyzed by experts and say, yes, that's the exact sort of way his signature goes. And there's this clear lineage of auction houses and owners, but there's always that 1% chance that there's some expert forger that's giving you a fake Picasso. So on the blockchain and art that's digital and giving digital artworks that ability to be owned really piqued my interest. And obviously CryptoPunks were one of sort of the first communities and projects to launch. And then once you go in that rabbit hole, that's your life gone basically. So one thing led to another, and obviously discovered generative art and discovered art blocks and went through that whole journey of every Friday. I think it was every Friday evening. It was my time. I'd have a beer and my wife would be making dinner, and I'd be in furiously trying to do 3,000 gwei to mint a piece. So yeah, that was always a huge amount of fun. But at one point, I said, okay, well, if Eric and Jeff were to go sort of back in time, what would they potentially have done different? Not to put words in their mouth, but me as sort of coming from a startup world, I couldn't help but sort of imagine what I would have done in that instance, or how I would build upon art blocks. So yeah, Chris was a sort of a longtime friend, and him and I started doing a little bit of brainstorming. And the one thing that I noticed was I really wanted to take time to understand an artist's story. So we wanted to originally, whenever we were sort of creating Gen.art, we wanted to give people a guaranteed piece of art. So they could do it on a Sunday if they're busy on a Friday night, or they could do it on a weekday evening, or they could do it over a glass of wine or whatever. The minting would be on their terms. So that was one of our fundamental sort of start missions to founding Gen.art was giving people their own time to breathe and mint and really find out about the artist and then click the mint button. But yeah, so long story short is I went down the AB rabbit hole, started to think how I would have created an art platform a little bit different, how I could really foster a sense of community, and at the end, at the other end was we ended up creating Gen.art, and we also wanted to sort of bake in the best of Web3. So we launched it as a DAO where everybody would have a vote, and sort of eventually Chris and I taking a step back, etc. And we also wanted to, yeah, really, as I said, focus on the storytelling and focus on sort of blending offline and online. So there was a lot of sort of unique elements that we wanted to focus in on our mission for our generative art platform. And yeah, it's been a whirlwind. As I said, it was maybe just over a year, and boy, has it been a lot of work. Yeah, I think I've had like 2 or 3 burnouts throughout the past year. Like it's, yeah, it was pretty crazy roller coaster. I think we've done about 20 drops with 20 incredible artists. I think overall, in terms of transaction volume for the art pieces and memberships, we're coming up on like $100 million. So yeah, it's been pretty crazy.
That's amazing. And before we go like too deeply into Gen.art, I'd love to
Mhm.
hear what was your startup background like, and how has that helped with being in the Web3 startup space, if you will?
Yeah, well, it helps a measure. Like it's immensely helpful. Anybody who's sort of a builder, anybody that's coming from Web 2.0, or anybody that's done their own startup in the past, you can't help but, because it's so much green field. There's so much opportunity. If you're an innovator or somebody who thinks outside of the box, like your brain just can't chill in this space, because there's just so many things you want to do. So my thing was, okay, Adam, get some focus and just focus in on one project and make sure that you do it well. So, and also surround yourself with very smart people. And that's what we did with Gen.art. And through that sort of CryptoPunk community, we kicked off with our advisor, two of our core advisors. One was Mr. 703 and one was Hype. Hype was helping on the tech side, and Mr. 703 just from sort of his strategic vision. And also Silly Tuna, he helped us quite a bit. So these three prolific collectors helped us launch. But yeah, from startup days to Web3, there's just so much opportunity. Yeah, the main thing is just being able to get some focus, because there's so much you could be doing.
Yeah, we definitely feel that on the collector's corner side, and there's so
Yeah,
much information. How do you corral it? How do you package it? Or, I mean, in some ways, put it into a product for people to consume. And what's the best way to do that? And of course, there's a million things to iterate on, always.
exactly.
So,
Yeah,
as somebody who likes to build and make things better, it's both great and frustrating, because it's never quite where you want it to be. But I think that's the journey, and it's awesome to hear that a lot of what you did in your past crossed over to Web3. I have one more question that is may lead to a bit of a longer answer in terms of your journey prior to Gen.art. We were talking a little bit offline about you collecting Chromie squiggles, and I know you touched on
mhm.
getting art box. Do you have any stories from those days that you want to highlight?
Yeah, sure. Well, obviously, like none of us, well, I don't know, maybe some people had their sort of, they had the vision to understand where all of this could go. But back last year, I was just sort of buying cool stuff, selling cool stuff, just there sort of for the community. And actually this morning I was just going through some of the wallets, and yeah, I noticed like, oh, because I'm now, you'll see from my Twitter, I'm on the hunt for quite a cool sort of forever squiggle, because I wanted to give a bit of a hat tip to Eric and art blocks for sort of lighting my fire for generative art. And way back a year ago or so, more than a year ago, I saw myself buying and selling squiggles at like zero point 0.4 ETH, and I was like, oh, Adam, you should have just bought and held, because now it's like, for me to get the same piece, I have to do a huge outlay of sort of tens of thousands. So yeah, no, there's tons. But I think it was quite a cool, obviously the space has evolved a lot, and maybe we'll touch upon this later in the podcast, in terms of like artists now come equipped with understanding the space a lot more whenever they come to Gen.art, just as an example. But back then it was sort of, nobody really knew what was happening. There was just so much new stuff every single day, and the sort of sense of community back then, it was a little bit different. Whereas now it's matured, people sort of find their niches, people understand why they're in this space. Back then, I think people were just doing it for the fun and the creativity, and for the hell of it. But now whenever you see that actually, whoa, we have ushered in, or we're in the midst of ushering in this cool new or amazing creative renaissance, like once in a lifetime opportunity, yeah, it's now a little bit more serious. And obviously, whenever stuff's a little bit more serious, you're not as sort of free willed, and you're not as you're sort of making sure that you're not making mistakes. Whereas back then, it was just like, yeah, cool, anything goes. So yeah, no, a year ago it was definitely an interesting time, an interesting space, just because there was so much newness, and none of us really knew what it was. Well, maybe some people did, but for me, it's evolved a bit. It's a bit more serious. There's all these different niche areas within NFTs and artwork and online digital art. So yeah, no, it was a fascinating time, and I think my wife didn't see much of me during that. I was just constantly on my laptop.
Yeah, I'm a little bit later than you to the generative art space, and I just oftentimes think of, man, what would it have been like to mint a Fidenza or be there
Yeah,
on day one for a squiggle. I mean,
yeah,
my bags are largely allocated towards a day zero squiggle, so
yeah, yeah,
I just think it's historic, and there's going to be something about it that's just, when things are minting out, and today, especially like hyped PFP projects, and in 15 minutes or less with gas wars, I remember back to Moonbirds, and imagine just having free will. And I hear the conversations about G Money, like batch minting hundreds and hundreds of squiggles. It was just a different time. It's cool.
yeah. And some of those people, like if you had, I wasn't sort of as technically minded. For sure, I can look at code and understand it, and more technically minded than some. But if you understood Solidity or understood how blockchain contracts worked, and understood how to batch mint, like a key advantage was even just being able to mint from the contract back then. So yeah, the opportunities back then were immense. And yeah, I remember I actually minted a couple of Fidenzas, but then it was interesting seeing the chat happen back then, because not a lot of people, and it's an interesting, I've never really even took a moment to take pause and think about it, but back then people didn't really go and dig into Tyler Hobbs or who was Tyler. They were just like, oh, there's this AB mint this Friday. We're gonna throw a load of gas at it, get this mint, and it was because it was predominantly flippers back then. Whereas now, to see people actually do take the time to go and research the artist, see what their past work is, see what their sort of common thread that holds all of their various creations together. And so, yeah, it's interesting seeing the mentality change from the crazy summer days of last year to now.
Do you think that, or is there any correlation? I hate to lead the witness here, but of having that observation, maybe consciously or subconsciously in the past, to why Gen Art is and approaches the market the way it does? I mean, I'm taking notes here, and two things that just kept popping out to me is community and communication, and it seems like you're embracing that approach.
Yeah, 100%. And that was because I came from this sort of traditional art background, and being sort of a small tier collector. You really want to understand the artist. You want to understand what goes through their mind to how they approach the artwork. Like I've got a couple of Banksies, and obviously he's a man of mystery. But you watch enough interviews, here, looking at enough of his exhibitions, watch his movie that he published with Mr. Brainwash. Like you start to understand the person, and that's sort of the piece speaks to you a lot more, because I have all of my artwork up around the house, and whenever I'm walking to the kitchen for a coffee in the morning, I just recently bought a Lars Wander pen plotted piece that was via verse, and it now sits on my walk to the kitchen. And whenever I'm thinking about whenever I'm walking down there in the morning, I'm like, it just gets me thinking, and I love that sort of physicality. Then I get thinking about like how Lars approached that, what his specific style is. So yeah, I love the story of an artist, hearing their voice, hearing their voice in my head as I walk past the piece, and being able to communicate at least a little bit about their art to people that come to the house. So yeah, no, the story is incredibly, incredibly important. And as you say, I think that was one of our core genesis, like one of our core pillars when creating Gen.art. And I think that's visible through, we were one of the first sort of platforms to create this beautiful landing page for a drop. We remember spending a lot of money on designers to really immerse people into that look and feel. Like I went to the extent where I wanted the page to look and feel like the artist's mind. I wanted it to be a little bit of a peer into how they approach the world. And through all of that storytelling, we also invested in like videos where we would interview the artist, and none of that stuff had been done before on these art platforms. Again, just all with the mission of building that relationship between the collector and the artist. Because again, if the collector understands about the artist and really respects them and understands their story, like it's just going to be such a healthier relationship. They're going to buy that piece of art. They're going to hold on to it forever. They're going to tell their kids about it. They're going to remember that crazy journey. They're going to know how they ushered in the creative renaissance. Like there's just no losing side to understanding the story behind an artist.
That's amazing. And I think anyone that goes on your website could see the work and effort that you all put into that approach. It's quite fantastic. And I think refreshing as well in the space where there's so many things pulling at your attention, particularly in an up market. Right now, it feels like there's still that happening, and we're in a down market. So I'm curious, do you think that more collectors will shift towards this mindset of, let's call it quality over quantity, and really try to build that relationship and understand the artist better? Or,
Yeah.
maybe another way is, how do we mitigate this like crazy dopamine rush world we're in, where, it's like you're snapping your head left and right. It's like,
for better or worse, I think it's always going to be there. And this might seem like I'm hugely anti flippers, etc. I'm not. I think the liquidity that they've brought to the system has made us progress at a rate of knots quicker than had they not been. The space has matured because there's been so much capital and so much attention given to it. And yeah, for sure. Like if you're new to the space and you're entering in now, it's actually very, very calm. People are taking the time to go and understand artists. Platforms are telling their story. There's a lot more out there in terms of understanding a little bit more behind the canvas. But in an up market, like I remember on Friday afternoons, whenever it was mint day on AV Curated, it was just mayhem. It was crazy. Whenever people would just be like, oh, free money time. And that's where, so I say that because I want to give you the context of where I was creating Gen.art from. Obviously, the macro market moves, the whole space evolves, everything sort of changes, and we change and evolve too. But back then, and that's why I was sort of focusing on story so much, that was important to us. Now, the whole market has sort of moved to saying, hey, yes, we know that we understand that it's important to tell the artist's story. So now you'll see a lot of the platforms and a lot of people and communications on Twitter, et cetera, and spaces, Twitter spaces. You'll see people learning about the artists now, which is good.
Yeah, and for Collector's Corner, when we do our deep dives, that's part of our research is really understanding the artist. And so that point has had like a deep resonance with me personally. And it kind of, honestly, it's been one of the more fun aspects of this is, I've jumped down the Snowfro wormhole here, but at the same time, like we obviously didn't discover, but digging into Matt Cain's history or Matt Delorier, like it's just, you start to understand like you scratch the surface of like the psyche and some of the motivation of each of the artists. I mean, it becomes intoxicating to some degree. So I respect what you're trying to do because I think it is an important part of the story, and art, in my opinion, in general, is very much an emotional form of expression, and finding that connection is absolutely important.
The other thing that we sort of did to complement that, so obviously it's easy enough online to create a beautiful page that describes the artist, describes the artwork, so that you can eventually scroll to the bottom and hit mint whenever you want to hit mint. But we also, one of our other founding pillars, as I said, I really love physical art. And if you go back and listen, I think it was Delphi Digital with Tom Shaughnessy. I did a podcast with him way back at the start, and I listened to it last night just to see what I was talking about back then. And I said in that podcast, like I kicked this off with the goal of getting art into people's homes. I wanted art on walls so that it could create discussion points, etc. And if you think, actually, it's really satisfying to look back and quite proud that. So we created this print shop where people, I think we've done over like 5,000 prints shipped worldwide. We do it at cost price. We just want to, and it's super high quality. So we partnered with this really cool print studio that you can decide the print paper, the artist can decide the print paper, the print method, everything. Like they are very, very good. And to complement that storytelling online, I wanted to get the art into people's homes. So the print shop was sort of also a big pillar in our founding. And then the next pillar on was bridging this online and offline world. So that's where we started to do the IRL exhibitions. So we did a gallery, I think it was a week or 2 weeks long in London. And then just a few months ago, we did a month-long residency in Los Angeles with Vellum LA, really, really cool gallery with beautiful screens that are made specifically for NFTs, and then the artwork just pops. So all of those things combined, you can see, as you said, these same threads keep coming up. It's community, it's making sure that you're telling the story. It's bridging that real world with the digital world, and those are what really makes that's what's important to us.
And Adam, as you're talking about the initiatives you've gone through to help people connect with the artists and build a community, what have you learned works and doesn't work, or perhaps what works better? We don't have to talk about what doesn't work as well. Because it strikes me a lot of what we're doing in Web3, just trying to learn about this stuff. And
Yep.
yeah, and as an innovator, as a creator, what are you seeing so far that maybe could be interesting for artists listening or other creators listening as to what is a good technique?
Yeah, it's as you say, it's sort of it's like A/B testing. You just have to build something, test it, see if it resonates with the market. That's why you'll see us doing a million things at once, and it's sort of real time, as I say, real time A/B test, seeing what resonates with the market and seeing what resonates with the community, and sort of doubling down on that, and discarding quickly what doesn't, because we are a very finite resource. Like it's just me and Chris, and we've got Mav, who was one of our early moderators, who's sort of now part of the team, and we've just recently brought on Julius. So, but at the core, it is and was only me and Chris. So we had very limited time. So we had to quickly try and brainstorm. Hey, where do we want this to go? Throw that out to the market in terms of put that into our Discord, hear from the community what they think of all of these various paths that we could go down. Ones that seemed like they were showing promise, we would quickly build the bare bones sort of framework, like MVP from startup world, minimal viable product, and build that, see if it resonated. If it did, then yeah, as I say, double down on it. And if it doesn't, then quickly discard. So it's just being able to sort of do that methodically and quickly, because the space moves very fast. And if you're going to roll out something, or if you're going to build something, that's going to be at least a month or 2 month cycle. So yeah, I would say something that's been very important for us over the past year has been our speed of execution, being able to listen to the community, being able to discard stuff that doesn't show promise early on, and yeah, being able to double down on the stuff that does. So paying some attention to metrics, paying a lot of attention to the community, and empowering the community. I think in the early days, I was a little bit too. It was like my baby. I wanted to make sure that it was grew up to be the best version of itself, and sort of I didn't fully understand the capability of the community. Like we have 5,100 members from all around the world, from all sort of backgrounds, and from all sort of different experience levels of life. And if we had listened to them earlier, we'd probably progress. So it's sort of a double-edged sword, because you give up speed of execution because you have to do the whole communication piece. You have to be able to form a communication piece and settle upon how do you get to like end objective. And whenever you open a community door, that can be quite lengthy. But yeah, I think one thing would have been to really onboard the community earlier. Something that we've really enjoyed over this past few months, and it's actually quite poignant, has been we took pause on our drops, our art drops. You'll notice that we haven't dropped for the past, I think, 3 months. That was intentional because we just decided to say, hey, we want to build the platform and the technology behind it. We built out a curation board, so community-driven curation board with a couple of artists on it, and all of the community voted on those people. So, and a whole bunch of other stuff that we'll jump into probably later in the podcast. But the one thing, that we've been doing over this past few months is really been focusing in on building out, listening to the community, getting these working groups together. And it's crazy, like all of these, we have these amazing community calls every Sunday where everyone has a lot of other better stuff that they could be doing or should be doing, but we still jump on the Discord and we just nerd out and chat about, hey, how do we progress Gen.art, and how do we get the best art into collectors' hands? So yeah, it's been fascinating. So super long answer, but hopefully I answered your question.
You give some. I think you did a brilliant job of answering the question, and I appreciate all the detail, and I know our listenership will love the insight into what the mindset is. It's admirable that you guys are trying to find the balance between speed of execution and community. I think it's a hard balance, and there's never a locked in recipe, so to speak. But one of the points that I'm really fascinated with, because and if I'd love to scratch this itch a little bit more, but is
Mm.
you referenced a curation board and the artist selection. I mean, I've been
Yep.
scrolling through the list of artists on here, and it's really impressive. Do you mind doing a little bit deeper dive into that? Because everybody, I shouldn't say everybody, each platform has a different approach. So I'd love for the listenership to understand how you guys approach the selection and what qualifies as
Yeah.
the right platform, or excuse me, the right artist for your platform.
Yeah, sure. So way back at the start, and actually I have to give a massive thanks to Alexander Rebin. So he was one of our first artists, and he's still with us to this day. He does a lot of stuff behind the scenes in terms of our relationships with galleries, our relationships with sort of press within the art world, and all of our IRL galleries. So we're going to have an exhibition in Tokyo, I think, at the beginning of next year. And the one that was in LA, a lot of that was Alex driving it. So I don't know, actually. I need to ask him how we stumbled upon one another, but somehow we found one another. And I said, "Hey, Alex, we're just about to launch this platform, and do you want to come on board and do a drop with us?" And we were sort of building up the marketing comms, et cetera. So we did a couple of airdrops, and one of those airdrops was art by Alex Rebin, I think, called Klein's. So back then, it was sort of I was just trying to find cool artists that really understood the space, that were sort of OGs, that were in it for the right reasons, et cetera, et cetera. And Alex fit the bill 100% and even more. So that was like somehow we lucked out with the perfect launch partner in terms of art from Alex and his clients. Then we stumbled upon this really cool duo that did cesium with, I'm sure you can see it. I remember I called it our own sort of chromy squiggle because with so many sort of vivid colors, Orkan and Okan. And that on our first call, that was always, imagine that this duo that are in different parts of the world and they're called Orkan and Okan. And yeah, it was pretty crazy. I mixed them up a whole bunch. And one was an incredible tattoo artist, like very famous, and has like a 6-month waiting list for these like fine line tattoos. And I think back then we were just really, or as Chris was building out the technology, this was sort of predominantly me. I was just trying to find artists that brought cool diversity. So you had Alex at the start with his really sort of nerding out in the AI side of things. He had built all of these. He was just like a tinkerer. He just you could tell that he was a creative coder and somebody that really wanted to build a relationship with him, the technology, and the audience. And yeah, as I said, we couldn't have looked out for a better person. Then bring in this cool duo who make every photo that we had a professional photographer. Every photo that was taken, they just looked like really cool guys. You just sort of want to hang out and grab a beer with them. Then next we had Leia, who was our first artist. That was sort of our first drop that wasn't an airdrop. And I think I got a little bit of heat online because there was just so much hype back then. People were like, "Oh, we need Damien Hirst, or we need blue chip artist XYZ." And I really wanted to just take pause and be like, "Hey, actually, we're going to go out with." I think her age back then was a 14-year-old girl from India who has taken it upon herself to understand coding, understand generative art, and we really wanted to put a focus on sort of to show people what could be accomplished. And yeah, it was phenomenal to see her drop go out and her life change. And she was just so well spoken and sort of be a beacon for all of these young females who potentially within this sort of, it's usually male orientated, et cetera, that they could use her as a figure. And because she could speak so well, it was really, 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 really amazing. So I think to answer your question succinctly, back then I was just looking for diversity. So that's like 3 artists that are completely different as our first sort of 3 people that we went out with. As time progressed, we obviously started to pay attention to sort of what the audience and what the community wanted, what art was being recognized and what styles were being recognized. You can see this if you take a little bit of a step back in the generative art world. You can sort of see these styles and influences ebb and flow. You can see some cool parts, like if a drop does really, really well and people talk about a specific part of it, you'll see other artists sort of borrowing and experimenting, starting to sort of mold and meld that into their artwork. So one artist who was very pivotal for us was Rich Poole. We discovered him, this amazing coder, and he lives down in New Zealand. So it was always difficult because it was like the complete opposite time of day. It would be my morning or his evening and my morning. And he's just so just a full package in terms of understanding all of the is a really good example of an artist who came to the space prepared in terms of understanding the market, understanding what the audience wanted, and just being an incredible coder and incredible talent. And he was the first one to really know how to punish our servers. And so yeah, discovering Rich was really, really cool. And then sort of where I wanted to end up on this little bit of this little segment would be that actually we wanted to put it in the community's hands. It was always sort of our goal to have a curation board, because I shouldn't be sort of thinking about, oh, what's who's good and who's not good. And it wasn't even actually ever who was good or not good. It was just me trying to balance calendars. It was me trying to balance all of these different diversity in terms of styles and approaches to making art, and something just to keep our members always guessing, so that it wasn't sort of too stagnant or too static, or that piece is 100% from Gen.art, because they always sort of go for that style. I always wanted to keep it new and fresh. But yeah, as I said, nowadays we've got curation board, of which I'm just one vote. I think it's either 8 or 10 people, and within there we've got Alex Rubin, we've got Rich Poole, we've got Kelly Milligan, we've got a few really big collectors as well. So yeah, it's been fascinating over the past few months to see the devotion and the skill that these guys have in terms of the curation board, jumping into a piece of art, having that dialogue with an artist, pushing them a little bit sort of to get beyond their comfort zone. And yeah, as a result, we've now got like, I think maybe 10 to 15 really amazing artists lined up for the next little while in Gen.art. So yeah, sorry if I riffed on a bit there, but hopefully
No,
I answered your question.
I love this, and I love the diversity that you're bringing into it. I mean, just the story you were talking about, Leia being a 14-year-old artist from India, and giving the platform to really not only have her own artistic expression, but almost be, and hopefully turn into, the beacon for inspiration for others. I mean, it's a really great story, and I've just been scrolling through all of the artists and reading their stories, and finding that diversity amongst, we'll call it maybe more established people who bring eyes to the platform, and then really being the platform to advocate for others and their growth. That's really admirable, and I appreciate you sharing that story.
No
But
worries.
it's a perfect transition, in my opinion, into kind of the mechanics of where Gen.art is today. Meaning, I mean, you guys you have a token, a DAO, and then there's obviously the curation panel. Do you mind just taking a step back and shedding light on the current state of mechanics, and knowing full well this is Web3, so it will probably change by the time somebody listens?
Yeah, exactly. And that's the thing. People that are coming to this from like, whenever, if anyone's averse to change, it's not your space, because if you do something like, some people, you can tell in Discord that whenever stuff moves fast, they're like super angry, like, oh, why didn't you do this? Or you said you were going to do this. And it's just like, well, the space is just moving. We could continue to do that, but it would maybe be wasted time. So yeah, in terms of taking a step back, it's actually a really, as I said, we've taken the past 3 months to sort of take pause, re-strategize, and sort of regroup and think, hey, where are we going over this next year? And obviously get the community more and more involved, so that Chris and I aren't just sort of there's no sort of key person risk. And yeah, so we've obviously got our sort of bread and butter, which is launching artists, and you could sort of maybe equate that to our curated element, where we curate an artist. We launch sort of one of many generative art, AI art, and 3D art. The generative art is 100% on chain. The AI art and the 3D art is IPFS, similar to the likes of Braindrops, etc. So we've got this core launch platform, which does one of many, typically anywhere between 300 and 1,000 pieces of art. And we do that at the moment. I think our cadence is going to be once per month, and you have to be a member to mint. But so over the past year, you've had to be a member, and you could only be a member. Otherwise, you have to purchase a piece of art on secondary. But what we're going to be doing for our kickoff drop, which is on the 21st of November with an amazing artist called Mutsu, is public mint after X hours. So I think we've settled in on 12 hours. So our members have, and this is an example of us learning from like way back in the day. Us doing the membership model was quite cool, quite innovative. It helped you get a little bit of a breath of fresh air. It helped you build your community. But one thing that we've learned from other platforms and other people that are launching in this space is actually, you want to have that little bit of openness to keep that trajectory and the drive and the momentum of a drop, and welcome people into the community a little bit more. Whereas if you just have your gates up, it's maybe a little bit too gated. So yeah, we're going to have public minting. So we've got our curation part where we're doing a drop once per month. It's going to be, it's up to the artist, but on this one, it opens up to the public after a little while. And then in terms of the overall platform, yes, we've got this Gen.art token, which is a governance token. So for people that want to be a little bit more involved, there may be builders at heart that maybe want to be part of sort of the core team, you've basically got a Gen.art governance token to vote. So if you jump on the snapshot, you'll be able to see all of the various JIPs, so our Gen.art and improvement proposals. Anyone is welcome to pull together one of these, and we're actually getting a great momentum now. There's a lot that needs to, so we always use nouns as sort of our best in class to try and replicate some of what they've done. But yeah, from the outside, there's a lot of stuff that needs to be aligned and a lot of stuff that needs to be in place for you to be able to have a sort of sufficiently working governance structure. Now we've got to the place where we have all of those pieces in place where people can then have a bit of a discussion. If there's a group that rallies behind something, they put together a JIP, we throw it up on Snapshot, then everybody votes on it, then we can potentially, then we either sort of go ahead with it or maybe it's voted against or whatever. So yeah, we've got the curation core part, which is the art. Then we've got the Gen.art governance token, which is sort of steering the ship. And then something that we're just about to launch. And then we've also got the print shop where you can print art. And then we're also working on a self-serve platform. So it's always been on our to-do list. And in the past, whenever gas was super high, it didn't really make sense because artists maybe didn't want to take the risk, or it is prohibitively expensive to put a script on the blockchain is like $2,000 to $3,000. But now that gas has come down, it's a little bit cheaper. And those that do want to be able to sort of bring their own crowd or work on their own time, or just basically like to be sort of a little bit more self-sufficient and maybe want to put something live at 2 a.m. or they don't want to go through the whole rigmarole of us having to do, like we do a lot of podcasts, we do a lot of video work, like we do a lot of investment in terms of telling that story of the artist. Maybe they don't want to do that. Maybe they're introverted and they just want to get some art out there. So another big thing that we're working on at the moment is this self-serve platform on ETH and potentially on an L2. So yeah, that's sort of our ecosystem as it stands at the moment. We're also working on this sort of smaller editions and works on paper. I think P, you and I were talking about this offline a little bit. This is sort of for the artists that are launching pieces that are 10 to 20 piece collections, where it's sort of this more white glove Sotheby's Christie's feel, where it's just about trying to find these. I see various pockets of people, and I want to try our best to accommodate them without getting sort of spread too thin and losing our core vision. So if you think about it, we've got our curated, where we've got our curation board, and that's our bread and butter, and that's where the members come and they have early access, and then it opens to public. Then we've got our self-serve. If you're just like, hey, I want to put up some art and I don't really care what happens, and I'll tweet out the link and give it to my friends. And I think the next Picasso could potentially be discovered there. And then also you've got the white glove service where you've got this really beautiful framing, really beautiful printing, very small editions, very like hand signed. So those are sort of the three things that are floating around in our ecosystem that we want that we are pushing out over the next little while.
And for clarity, you have it's the Gen.art membership token. You can find it on OpenSea, correct? That's the
to become a member, just type in Gen.art and OpenSea, and you should stumble. You'll find us. It's this little card that rotates, and within that, then you can go and verify in Discord, and we've got all of these different channels. But yeah, to be able to mint a piece of art going forward within those first 12 hours, you'll need that membership pass. Whereas in the past, you could only mint if you had that membership pass. But now we're going to open up the gates. If our core membership crew of 5,100 people don't mint out a drop, then it opens up to the public and allows people in.
And for the listenership, there's a pretty attractive price point right now of about 0.1 ETH to get in. I think it's it's a banging deal from everything I'm hearing. And one of the mechanics I'm trying to understand is I'm looking at mints anywhere from 200 to 5,000. Mm-hmm. How do you prioritize membership if there's 5,000 passes and only 300 mints?
Yeah, and this has been such an interesting. I wish there was somebody much smarter than me and the team that could have sort of done a deep dive analysis on this, because yeah, it's sort of, how do you make room for growth? How do you have a big enough community where it's thriving? How do you have a community where people can sort of come and go as they please? And then also, how do you bake into that positive tailwinds to give a drop the best sort of conditions to let it thrive and succeed and be the best version of itself? So there's all of these very important competing dynamics that are sort of multi-dimensional. And at the end of it, it's sort of through trial and error and sort of paying attention to the results that we've been able to pivot. And at the moment, sort of to give you a bit of a pulse, and you have to also take into account the macro conditions. You have to take into account the art and whether or not it's a very niche or whether it's sort of going to be widely sought after. As you say, we've got 5,100 memberships. We've seen a really sort of nice sweet spot of between 300 and 500 pieces for the long form generative. And I think the upcoming mutual drop with Moods, so we've settled in on 300. And we basically just, this one, we think it's a bit special. It's beautiful art, really wonderful story. And it's obviously our comeback in terms of we've been away for 3 months building. We want to come back with a little bit of a bang. So we want to build and want to induce a little bit of a FOMO element. And we're pretty certain like our membership are pretty keen on this. But still, we want to show people that, hey, there is this potential for public. So I think we'll maybe see 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 maybe open up into public. That would be ideal because then we get to illustrate the whole thing working together. But yeah, to answer your question, the 5,100 memberships and how do you settle in? When I said at the start, like I opened this up where I wanted people to be able to take their time and have a glass of wine and mint something after they listen to a podcast. It didn't need to be somewhere because don't forget, not everyone's in one time zone. So thankfully, Art Blocks, it worked out that it was sort of like 5 or 6 p.m. for me in the evening. So I could have my beer and mint, but somebody over in Japan or somebody in Dubai or whatever, like they're having to impact their schedule. So way back then, I thought I wanted to make it available to anyone to mint at any time. But then that's a direct conflict to inducing those tailwinds in terms of secondary and FOMO and sort of the dynamics that people are used to. And if you don't give those dynamics that people are used to, they're like, oh, well, what's this drop isn't anything special, or this, maybe this platform doesn't have the pool that you think it does, or like the platform doesn't have the pool that potentially Art Blocks does. So it's sort of balancing those pros and cons. So if you open it up to 5,100 people, it's not going to be a rush to mint. So then potentially not as much cool art gets discovered, but people do have all of the time in the world and they can discover the story, etc. Whereas if you have it the complete other side, I remember we had Fjall where it minted out in like 20 seconds, 1,000 piece long form by Tangle, and then also more recently Closer by Dan Zucco, our 3D drop. It was 100 pieces and sold out in a second. So yeah, it's always interesting trying to balance those things. There's no perfect answer, and some people will be a little bit grumpy sometimes that potentially they missed out. But I guess next time we'll come back a little bit more ready and a little bit more. So it's trying to find that perfect balance, not hugely like, wow, what just happened, whirlwind, AB summer 2021, but a little bit of a balance in between.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that makes a lot of sense. And we see this model in other places with members, and there's just a lot of things you have to balance. Maybe the artist wants to do a 100-piece drop.
Exactly.
Case, yes. What can you do?
Yeah,
and speaking of balance, this is one that I'm curious how you all are tackling. You have a DAO structure, but you still have your centralized team. How do you split up the types of things, or how do you think about what the DAO should vote on versus what the central team should go ahead and manage? And by the way, I think this is the right structure, especially early on, where you do need to be nimble at times. But I'm just curious how you're towing those forces there.
Yeah, and it sort of happened organically. Like we didn't have a clue how it would settle or how it would evolve and what the perfect operational structure would be. And yeah, you're right. In the early days, having Chris and I just sort of call the shots and move quickly and break things and then eventually find niches and products that worked for us. But as time progressed, we started to understand how we could pull various members of the community in. So for instance, there's like a few pillars that drives any org. It's like, okay, marketing, operations, all of these core pillars. And we just started to form these working groups around these various pillars. So like people that really enjoy communications and marketing, we created a group for them. People that really enjoy discovering artists and talking to artists and so on and so forth, we created a group for them. People that are good at operations and enjoy sort of IRL stuff, they're the ones that help build out all of the IRL exhibitions, et cetera. So it was just basically finding these core pillars that are within any org and then opening up to the community to say, hey, do you want to lead this? Do you want to drive it forward? And actually then just recently, you'll see if you jump onto our snapshot, as we've matured and now we're at a place where the community really can get their hands dirty and really can deliver value and build stuff in our within our ecosystem, you'll see that we've got our sort of recalibrating or reconfirming our mission, vision, and values, just because you want to have that North Star to aim for. So, do people align with what Gen.art is, what our mission is, what our vision is, what our values are? If you do, great, cool. Now you can get into a position where you can potentially lead a working group or work with a working group to help hit some OKRs and KPIs. So we effectively, Chris, the whole community, we sort of vote on these OKRs or these short-term quarterly goals and both longer annual goals. And then that sort of trickles down into our working groups where they, some marketing genius will set their goals that will help the overall ecosystem hit the goals. So yeah, so infusing quite a bit of like startup methodology in there, and then just finding where the community is best placed. And then, yeah, the whole thing at the moment is just communication. Whenever there's a lot of people involved, it's very easy to fall out of the loop. And the Gen.art of last week is very different to the Gen.art of this week. And how do you catch those people that have maybe been away on holiday or just been away from keyboard for a week? How do you make it as easy as possible to re-engage in the community, see what has changed, and see where we're going? That's because if you don't do that, you're going to sacrifice on speed a lot, because people are going to be confused. They're going to be, because there's so many moving pieces, and then it just all hell breaks loose. And you might as well have just stayed a sort of small, nimble, non-community driven platform.
Yeah, absolutely. And you and I talked a little bit about this offline. I think there are certainly a lot of benefits to having this community, as you mentioned earlier, a lot of the expertise, probably just hearing about things that you couldn't otherwise as a small team, sort of crowdsourcing info, if you will. But there's, it's a tool. Community is a tool, and it should be utilized when the time is right. And for us at Collectors Corner, it's just not quite yet the time for us to go and have a Discord and a membership and all that. But it's certainly something that we think about. And I'm glad to hear that you have been very thoughtful about both building that community and then also how you are incorporating them into your operations in a way that can make sense. And I want to switch gears a little bit because we are going to get close to time. I can't believe how fast this is going by again every time we talk. But the future of Gen.art, huge topic. You have a really, really interesting position as being a leader in the space and thinking about what could be done, experimenting. You've alluded to a lot of the different things that you are doing structurally in your platform, whether that's creating different outlets, long form drops versus people, curation boards versus not. Which I love, by the way. I love that. In my mind, I think of it as the FX hash model, but having that on Ethereum, it's just going to lead to some interesting stuff. So, but anyways, not to get on a tangent. What else do you see coming up? Like, where do you seeing the trends that you've now seen and been privy to? Where do you see this evolving over the next, let's call it 3 to 5 years? In any way you want to answer that question, and particularly anything that you think is unexpected, where you almost had like this aha moment. This is how it's going to be. If there's anything like that, but just anything that comes to mind.
Yeah. I guess the to start off with the expected, we fully understood that we were early and that the space was going to get more crowded. And in terms of people creating platforms, people finding niches, et cetera, et cetera. And you can see that. You can see all of these different communities rallying around all of these different missions. So people that are sort of doing the IRL minting, people that are doing the self-serve, people that are really focusing in on curation. So we always knew that space was going to have more and more people coming to it. One of the interesting dynamics, and I'm probably not smart enough or haven't thought through methodically enough, or every time I do, I sort of start contradicting myself, is how the artists approach this space. So artists are sort of the lifeblood of everything we do. They're the ones that create this wonderful artwork, and we're all here to listen to their story. And I can see artists, obviously there's sort of this risk. Artists that come with, that are sort of more community, that have more skill set around building a community around their artwork, or maybe they come with a community, maybe they're already sort of a famous artist that's entering the space. I think those guys and girls have a lot of opportunity because they sort of get to dictate or paint their own path or decide where they want to go. So I think you'll see it with Manifold. It's very interesting what they're doing. There's this other company called, I think it's like Verse or something, where basically artists craft everything. So people that have the technical ability, understand their marketing, have the community, they basically do their whole one-stop shop and they produce their own artwork. And I think there are going to be a few artists that have that capability and that desire to do that. But then I think there's also going to be a want and a need for both artists and collectors to feel part of a community. And that's sort of what Gen.art is trying to sort of satisfy, having this deep niche of people where you can come in and just feel welcome, and also have everything taken care of from you. You'll see our artist intro PDF, there's this slide where it's like Gen.art provides, and it's all this big long list, and on the other side artist provides, and it's just art. Like, we want to take all of the hassle out of everything for the artist and leave them to be focused. Like, they're usually crazy intelligent, crazy like mad geniuses, and we want to leave them to be the mad geniuses. We don't want them to be thinking about, oh, how do I get a cameraman to record my interview to help tell my story about this piece of art. We want to take care of that. So in terms of how this space is going to evolve, I think there's definitely going to be a continuation of platforms that sort of find their own niches in terms of what they provide to the people that seek them out. I think there's going to be artists that come wanting to do their own thing and want to sort of control the experience from start to finish and sort of do that. But that is hard, and it does take a lot of skill, but there are artists out there that can do it. Then there's going to be the people that do the self-serve. That's why we want to sort of get ahead and give people that Ethereum self-serve platform where you can all you have to do is click on, put your script up, and there'll be some sort of sense check to make sure it's not plagiarized code, etc. But yeah, we wanted to give people this easy FX hash experience on Ethereum. And then we also want there'll always be the behemoth of AB pushing the space forward in terms of getting. I see AB as being the best megaphone for us because they've got the best headlines. It gets somebody off the street to pique their interest of what generative art is, and then once you understand what generative art is, you go and find a community that speaks to you, and hopefully then Gen.art becomes one of those. But yeah. A bit of a meandering journey there, but I think hopefully you can see some of the things that I'm paying attention to.
I personally am excited to follow the path and see what unfolds. I mean, just even that reference to the ETH version of FX hash in being an open platform. It feels like it's a fun way for the introduction to new artists.
I don't know if you guys saw, but just recently on right click save as ArtGnome, or I don't know which editor did it in that team, but Matt Kane you mentioned about before, who created Gazers, he's actually either created or invested in this platform called The Platform, and I think it's the platform.studio, and they have this really interesting angle where you've got an artist that has this end piece of art, but it obviously goes a lot deeper than that. There's maybe multiple people involved in the creation, or maybe there were multiple versions of the art, or maybe there was a piece of text that was a source of inspiration. And what's really interesting about these guys is they're bringing together all of those. Imagine the end piece of art is a JPEG, and the layer beneath is this folder that came together to create that JPEG. They want to surface up that folder of inspirational material, co-artists, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, so that whenever you have this piece of art, you get all of the context that comes with it. So you potentially get the news clippings, you potentially get, you get to understand that piece of art as it was frozen in that moment of time. And so I think there's really, really cool stuff that we can't even forecast or think about. And that was just one recent example of something that caught my attention. I was like, wow, actually that's such a good idea.
Yeah.
So yeah, some really cool stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know, Jared, you have a question. I just wanted to make one comment before that. Matt Kane, it doesn't surprise me that he invested in this, given what you were saying about the snapshot in time and the way that his Gazers project is set up. And yeah. One hypothesis that I have that you and I were talking about off recording was, I think that as time goes on, these artists will start becoming like their own little mini community leaders. Yep. And they already are to some extent. Yep. And Matt Kane makes me think of that. Tyler Hobbs has his own Discord, for example. And Matt Kane just does it really, really well. And this is a shameless plug for Collector's Corner. You and I were talking about this. I mean, I think about this a lot because I'm fascinated by the power of Web3 and NFTs. And I think it has a lot to do with this community building, whether you're an artist or a doctor or whatever. I think eventually that is where things are headed. And you, Gen.art, have this awesome membership, and you guys are expanding that with some of the changes you're making to your platform. I think it's fantastic. I think that artists as well in that long list of things that Gen.art can help out with while they focus on the art is sort of this post-launch community building process that you yourselves are learning through your actions in Gen.art. We are learning through Collector's Corner. And I think it's an interesting journey to be on. So my shameless plug is we would, of course, love to help you guys and any artists in figuring out, well, how do you set up that community? What are the little tips and tricks and techniques you can do? But that's one place we see things going in the future. Let's see if you have any reaction to that. And then Jared, I know you wanted to ask something. So thanks for letting me interrupt there.
100%. It all comes back to, and what you just described is sort of a follow-on to the storytelling. You learn about an artist, understand how they approach artwork, get intrigued by their artwork, end up wanting to acquire a piece of their artwork, and then you want to follow on and build up a friendship potentially with that artist and follow them through their career. And I think we've seen it. The people that were a little bit more aware of this over this past year, like the community builders, as you say, like the Tylers and the Matt Canes, those are the guys that's why there's such a hustle and bustle around various pieces of that. You need that community, and it is essentially just about storytelling, because you're bringing together people that are all interested in your art, and you're obviously you share this common interest, and you'll just find yourself gravitating towards Discord or gravitating to wherever that community is, because you get to chat about stuff you like to chat about, and it takes you away from the hustle and bustle of life and the pressures of life, and you get that little bit of escapism. So community storytelling, it's so important. And as you say, it's so important to art, and why I think we're going through this amazing creative renaissance once in a lifetime is because we've now got all of these really cool tools to layer on top of that.
Well, I'm going to do a 180 pivot here, if you don't mind, since we're approaching the game clock expiration. You're doing so much stuff and really persistently pushing that proverbial rock up the hill, and in a space that is ever changing. You referenced burnout earlier, and I guess my question. So one, I appreciate the vulnerability. I think that was it was a data point, but for our listeners, because ourselves included, right? Like I just launched a fund on Tuesday. P is growing Collector's Corner and putting all of his time and attention into this. Do you have any sort of advice for any listeners who are very ambitious and willing to take on that same metaphoric rock up a hill? Like, what advice would you have so that way all of us don't have to do the same thing?
I'm super glad you asked, because it has, and it wasn't just me, Chris as well. Like this space is unforgiving. Like I was a high performer in terms of doing a Web 2 startup, but going Web 3, like as soon as you open your Discord doors, you're obviously like a proud parent, and you want your thing that you're building to do well. And when you're in bed and you're on your phone and you finally put it away and you hear that one buzz just as you close your eyes, and it's somebody asking a question, you as a founder, you can't help but pick up the phone and answer it. And much to my, like I've done a lot of learning, and I've done a lot of learning coming from having had a very, like, not being a stranger to hard work in terms of building startups. So somebody that's coming to this just fresh, just make sure to pace yourself, make sure to pay attention to mental health, make sure to switch off, make sure to, the term online is go touch some grass, because the space is unforgiving. There's always going to be something to do. There's always going to be somebody grumpy at you. There's going to be somebody behind a keyboard that's anonymous that's just shouting abuse at you because you're not doing the right thing or not doing what they're doing. Or maybe you're in a down market and they hold you responsible for losing cash or whatever. Just take it with a grain of salt, and just always remember why you're here, what your passion is. Take some time away, because even like I love art, I love technology, and it got to the stage where my wife couldn't even say the words Gen.art to me without me sort of like shivering a bit. Like you need to get away from even if it is a core passion, do spend a little bit of time away and have a lot of balance, get sleep, eat right, do fitness. Yeah. But it's a very, very, very important topic.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. As P's noted a lot of times, I have pretty hard boundaries about being present with family. I have 2 little boys. So finding that balance between passion and your personal, the things that fill you up, that's a great advice. I appreciate you for sharing that.
But and also, I should just to finish on it, like the highs that you can get are incredible. Whenever you build something, or like the day we launched Leia's art, I was so happy. Like the highs are unimaginable, but to equal that out, there's also some lows.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this is super important for anything that you are trying to do. I have a saying that I tell to myself is you need to lay the broader your foundation, the higher your peak, which means you got to take the time to exercise and eat. Because if you don't,
100.
eventually one of those things breaks and you will be
Yeah,
forced to stop.
yeah.
And
You'll
it
get
happens to
sick or
everybody.
whatever. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, 100%. And to some extent, this is also time to degen. I mean, let's be real. This was the last thing I wanted to ask you is when I say degen, I don't mean it in the derogatory way. I think it's like, oh, I really like something. I want to go and buy it
Yeah.
and go on the hunt, which we all enjoy. What are you collecting these days? To bring it back as you a collector, what's got your eye? You mentioned squiggles, but what else is?
We're recording this on a Friday tonight. We've got that bright moment. I think finger code. So I've got a pass for it. So I'm looking forward to seeing what I get on that front. Been a bit of a collector. Yeah, I've been going pretty hard this recently. So I'm doing Lars Wander. So he just did a thing with verse, some really beautiful art. Kubibi, a Japanese artist, amazing pieces. So I've actually got one just behind me now. Andrew Strauss. So I'm very much the art that I collect is and want and sort of degen over is at the moment is stuff that I want to put up in my home, and that stuff sort of usually lends itself to sort of pen plotter ish sort of art. Although we do have a couple of Samsung frames around, but I still have to sort of figure out how to get the art to display well on there. And then, yeah, just to finish, yeah, I wanted a bit of a hat tip to Eric and Art Blocks, and I wanted to go and get a forever squiggle. So at the moment, I've got like 10 DMs open trying to. It's like, yeah, it's like trying to get the hot property to try and find the forever, because they're obviously I wanted one just as they hit all time highs. Like you couldn't write this stuff, so they're obviously pretty hot at the moment. So wouldn't have as much pickings as you would typically have. So yeah, if you notice on my Twitter, I've actually got my little Notion guy, my little avatar that you'll get to know me by. On him at the moment, I've got a little squiggle as I'm on my squiggle journey. So I've just added a little squiggle to his hat.
That's amazing. It sounds like a lot of Tezos art that has your eye these days.
Yeah. Actually, I just recently also picked up a Zancam piece. Yeah, I'll jump into Tezos probably once a day. And I was actually saying to you, like from a collector standpoint, and also from a return on investment standpoint, if that's sort of one of the metrics you're looking at, the good thing about Tezos is an FX hash. I sort of jump in, buy the pieces I like, and then forget about them. So they're just always. Whereas in my Ethereum wallet, if I'm just like browsing OpenSea, I'll see what I've got, and I'll be like, oh, that's actually taking off at the moment. Should I offload a couple of pieces? And so I like the fact that I forget about my Tez wallet, and there's just so many incredible artists in there. Like it's bad. It turns out to be an expensive rabbit hole every time I open up that tab.
I'll share my own personal collecting ethos here, so you don't have a 0.3 ETH squiggle FOMO anymore. Yeah. I personally try to mint one and then buy two in the secondary, and I usually buy one that would be like my forever piece that I'm just absolutely like adorned with, like two, and I usually try to find one to flip in order to cover my costs.
Most of the smart people I chat to, that's the way to go. You get like two or three, get one to potentially cover cost basis, and then you're so much more chilled about your forever piece and the play piece.
Yeah, it's I've heard so many stories about this that are congruent to your point 0.3 squiggle ETH purchases and regretting it. And so I'm like, okay,
yeah.
How do we not get there? You know?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, 100%. Well, Adam, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with us.
Thank you, guys. It's been really fun.
Yeah, it's been amazing. Where can everybody find you and Gen.art?
Yeah, so well, thankfully, back we picked a pretty memorable brand in terms of just Gen.art. So if you want to hear more about the platform, just in your URL browser, just go GEN.art. And then for me, just I guess find me on Twitter. It's just Notion_Adam, and I'm sure, as you say, it's going to be down below in some show notes. So yeah, I should be easy enough to find, and would love to. My door is always open, always keen to chat with people. If you want to get involved somehow, yeah, just reach out and say hello.
Or if someone has a nice squiggle that they're looking to offload.
Yeah, or if you've got a good squiggle, yeah.
Love that as well. Well, hey, thanks again, my friend. I know it's getting late for you over there. We are at collectors_XYZ. So we really appreciate everybody tuning in. Definitely check out Gen.art. A lot of awesome stuff going on there in the future, as Adam mentioned. And there's actually a lot of pieces there that are extremely, extremely low in price point, undervalued, I might say, although who knows what happens in the future, but low price points. And as we stress here, if you get in at a low price point, as you just mentioned, it's just a lot easier to hold and not get stressed about it. So yeah, check it out. We'll link to everything. Thanks again, everybody, for tuning in, and we'll see you next time. Thank you for tuning into Collector's Corner. We really appreciate you taking the time to listen. If you like this episode and want to help us out, please subscribe and leave us a review on your podcasting platform of choice, like Apple Podcasts and Spotify, and follow us on YouTube. Please also follow us on Twitter for announcements as we expand to other social and content platforms. Our Twitter handle is @collectors_XYZ. We'd also love to hear any feedback you have, so please comment or reach out. We're always striving to be more useful and get better so we can help you in your collecting journey. The Collector's Corner team and their guests are not registered investment advisors. All views expressed on this podcast are personal opinions and are not specific inducements to make particular investments or investment strategies and should not be relied upon for investment decisions. This show is solely for informational and entertainment purposes only. Before making any financial decisions, please consult a professional.